The Council reviewed the battle data. The galaxy never saw humanity's true strength, until now. The Great Chamber of the Galactic Council floated in the empty space between two dying stars. It was shaped like a ring, built from black metal that had survived 10,000 years of war and peace. Inside the ring sat the leaders of 42 star nations. They were tall and short, some covered in scales, some with too many eyes, some who spoke only in colors of light. But all of them agreed on one thing: humanity did not matter. The humans had joined the Council only 20 years ago. They came from a small blue planet called Earth, a planet so far from the center of the galaxy that most species had never even heard its name before the humans arrived in their slow, clunky ships. When the humans first appeared, they carried weak weapons, old engines, and simple manners. The other species smiled behind their strange faces and gave humanity the lowest seat in the Council. A seat for a species that would never grow strong. A seat for a species that was, in the eyes of the galaxy, harmless. This story begins on the day that seat was taken away. Ambassador Kel Rethus of the Dravoon Empire sat at the head of the ring that day. His skin was pale green, and his eyes were like small black stones. He was proud, careful, and above all, patient. His people had ruled 100 star systems for 3,000 years. To him, humans were children playing with toy ships in a universe of giants. "The report from Outpost Theta is ready," said a soft mechanical voice. It came from Unit 7, a translator drone that floated above the center of the ring. "Shall I begin?" Kel Rethus waved a thin hand. "Begin." The chamber went dark, and a large hologram appeared above the ring. It showed a small human colony called New Meridian, sitting on a rocky moon at the edge of human territory. The colony was young, only 5 years old, home to about 80,000 people, farmers, engineers, teachers, and a handful of soldiers guarding a border nobody thought would ever be attacked. But it was attacked. 3 weeks earlier, a raider fleet from the Korath cartel had entered human space. The Korath were not a nation. They were pirates, smugglers, and slavers who roamed the edges of Council territory, attacking any world too weak to defend itself. They picked their targets carefully. They studied defenses. They struck only when they knew they would win easily. They chose New Meridian because their scouts reported something simple. Humans were new. Humans were small. Humans had no real navy near that moon. It would be an easy raid. Steal the fuel reserves, take slaves for the mining camps, and disappear before any real military could respond. The Korath commander, a cold and clever being named Draxus Vel, brought 12 warships to New Meridian. 12 ships against a colony that had, according to his scouts, only 3 patrol boats and a handful of ground troops with outdated rifles. It should have been simple. It was not. The hologram zoomed in on the moment the Korath fleet dropped out of hyperspace above New Meridian. Alarms rang across the colony. Sirens howled through underground tunnels. Civilians ran for shelter bunkers that had been built not for war, but for meteor storms and solar flares. Nobody at New Meridian expected an invasion. Nobody was ready. Except one man. Colonel Marcus Reyes was the commanding officer of New Meridian's small defense force. He was 43 years old, with gray hair at his temples and a scar above his left eyebrow from a training accident years ago. He had spent 20 years in the human military before coming to this quiet colony to finish his career in peace. He expected nothing more than routine patrols and boring reports. When the alarm sounded, Reyes did not panic. He had trained for chaos his whole life, even chaos he never thought would come. He ran to the command center, pulled up the sensor data, and saw the 12 Korath ships forming an attack line above the colony. "Sir, we have 12 enemy warships incoming," said Lieutenant Sarah Chen, the young officer at the sensor station. Her voice shook slightly, but her hands moved fast over the controls. "We only have 3 patrol boats. This is not good, sir." Reyes looked at the numbers. 12 against 3. On paper, it was a massacre waiting to happen. But Reyes did not think only in numbers. He thought in terrain, timing, and the will of the people fighting. "Get me every ship, every gun, every drone we have," Reyes said, "and wake up the miners. Tell them we need their equipment." Chen blinked. "The miners, sir?" "Yes," Reyes said. "Humans have always found ways to fight with what they have. Today will be no different. The council chamber watched this moment in silence. Kelrethus leaned forward slightly, though his face showed no real interest yet. To him, this was still a simple story. A weak colony would fall, the Korath would take their prize, and the council would send a strongly worded message of protest that nobody would follow. This was how it always went with small new species. They died, and the galaxy moved on. But the hologram continued, and slowly, the mood in the chamber began to change. On New Meridian, Colonel Reyes worked fast. The colony had civilian mining ships, heavy machines built to cut through rock and ice. They were slow and clumsy in space combat, but they were built from thick metal designed to survive explosive mining charges. Reyes ordered his engineers to strip weapons from the patrol boats and mount them onto the mining ships. It was not elegant. It was not by any military manual, but it added firepower where there had been none. At the same time, he called every able civilian with flight experience, retired pilots, hobbyist ship racers, even delivery drivers who flew small cargo shuttles. Within 2 hours, New Meridian had assembled not 3 warships, but 17 strange patched-together vessels. None of them were built for war. All of them were now going to fight one. "This is insane," Draxus Vel said aboard his flagship, watching the human fleet gather. His scouts had told him this colony was weak. Now he saw mining ships with guns bolted to their hulls flying toward his warships. It looked less like an army and more like a desperate mob. He almost laughed. Almost. "Form attack formation," he ordered his fleet. "Destroy them quickly. This will not take long." The battle began with the Korath firing first. Their weapons were strong, built for real war, tested in 100 raids across 100 worlds. The first wave of fire tore through 2 of the human patrol boats, turning them into burning wreckage in seconds. Screams filled the comm channels. This was the moment every Korath commander expected, the moment the enemy broke and ran. But the humans did not run. Colonel Reyes, watching from the command center, gave his next order calmly. "All ships, spread formation. Do not group together. Use the asteroid field to the east for cover. Mining lasers. Target their engines, not their hulls. We cannot punch through their armor, but we can cripple their movement." It was a strange tactic. Most militaries aimed for kill shots, for the biggest damage in the shortest time, but Reyes understood something the Korath did not expect. He understood that humans did not need to destroy the enemy fleet outright. They only needed to survive long enough and hurt the enemy enough that the raiders would decide the prize was not worth the cost. The human ships scattered into the asteroid field, using the floating rocks as shields. The Korath ships, built for open space combat, struggled to follow with the same speed. Mining lasers, weak against armored hulls, cut easily through the thinner engine plating of Korath ships. One by one, 3 Korath warships lost power and began drifting, helpless, away from the fight. Draxus Vel's calm expression began to crack. "How is this possible? They are civilians. They are farmers and miners." But that was exactly the point, though he did not understand it yet. The humans of New Meridian were not soldiers who fought because they were told to. They were people defending their homes, their children, their entire future. And that kind of fighting spirit did not come from training alone. In the council chamber, silence had fallen completely. Even Kelrethus had stopped his slow, bored breathing pattern. He watched with growing unease as the numbers on the screen shifted. 12 Korath ships, 3 crippled already, and the human fleet, though damaged, was still fighting. "Continue the report," Rethus said quietly. Unit 7's soft voice answered. The Battle of New Meridian lasted 6 hours. During this time, the human defenders destroyed 5 Korath warships and disabled 4 more. Only 3 Korath vessels managed to retreat. Human losses included 8 of 17 combat vessels and 112 casualties among defenders. The numbers floated in the air, cold and clear. 12 raider warships, built for war, defeated by 17 ships, built from mining equipment and civilian courage. "This cannot be an accurate record," said Ambassador Foss Undranar, a tall being from the Vreen Collective, his 4 arms crossed tightly. "No untrained force defeats a professional raider fleet with such numbers. There must be an error in the data." "There is no error. Unit 7 replied. The battle records were verified by 3 independent council monitoring satellites in the region. The footage you are viewing is unaltered. The council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. For the first time in 20 years, humanity was not being discussed as a footnote. It was being discussed as something the galaxy had underestimated. Kel Rethus stared at the final image on the hologram. It showed Colonel Marcus Reyes standing outside the colony's main dome, looking up at the sky, where the battle had just ended, smoke still rising from 3 fallen human ships behind him. His face was tired, sad, but steady. He had lost people that day, friends, neighbors, but his colony had survived. Send a full investigation team, Rethus finally said, his voice slower than usual. I want to understand what just happened. I want to understand what humanity truly is. Little did the council know, this was only the beginning. New Meridian was a small colony, a small battle, a small spark. But sparks, given time and fuel, become fires that light up the entire sky. And humanity, though it did not know it yet, was about to become the fire that the galaxy could not ignore. Far away on Earth, in a quiet military office, a general named Elena Voss received a report about the battle at New Meridian. She read it twice, then set it down slowly. She had spent her whole career warning people that humanity's quiet years in the galaxy would not last forever. Now, it seemed, the galaxy was finally about to learn who humans truly were. Get me Colonel Reyes on a secure line, she said to her aide, and pull every record we have on Korath fleet movements in the region. If they hit New Meridian, they will hit again. We need to be ready. The aide nodded and left quickly. General Voss turned to the window of her office, looking out over the lights of a city that had, until now, lived in peace under the shadow of a much larger galaxy. That peace, she suspected, was about to change. Back in the council chamber, the debate raged on. Some ambassadors demanded stronger sanctions against the Korath cartel for the unprovoked attack. Others quietly wondered, for the first time, whether humanity's low ranking within the council needed to be reconsidered. Kel Rethus said nothing more that day. He simply watched the final frame of the hologram, the image of Colonel Reyes standing amid the wreckage, and felt something he had not felt in a very long time: uncertainty. For 3,000 years, the Dragoon Empire had never felt uncertain about their place among the stars. But watching the quiet strength of a small human colony defend itself against overwhelming odds, Kel Rethus understood, deep down, that the galaxy was standing at the edge of something new, something that could not be measured by fleet size or weapon strength alone. Humanity had shown, in one small battle on one small moon, that it was not the weak, harmless species everyone believed it to be. And soon, the entire galaxy would learn just how true that was. The council meeting ended that day without any final decision, but every ambassador who left the black metal ring carried the same thought in their mind. The humans of Earth were no longer a footnote in the history of the galaxy. They were about to become its next great chapter. The council reviewed. The battle data. The galaxy never saw humanity's true strength. Until now. 3 months passed after the Battle of New Meridian, and the galaxy did not forget. News of the fight spread quickly through council space, told and retold by traders, diplomats, and soldiers, who could hardly believe what had happened. A small human colony, defended mostly by miners and farmers, had beaten back a professional raider fleet. Some species dismissed it as luck. Others called it a strange event that would never happen again. But a few, a very careful few, began to study humanity more closely. One of those who studied humans closely was Draxus Vel. He had escaped New Meridian with only 3 of his 12 ships. His pride was broken, and his reputation among the Korath cartel was ruined. Raider leaders who lost battles did not stay leaders for long. Draxus Vel knew this. He also knew that if he wanted to survive, he needed to understand what had truly happened at that colony. He needed to know why untrained humans had fought like seasoned soldiers. So he did something no other raider had done before. He studied human history. He found old human broadcasts, films, and books that had leaked into galactic networks over the years. He watched stories of past human wars, fought long before humans ever left their home planet. He saw records of humans fighting in freezing mountains, burning deserts, and flooded jungles, often with fewer weapons and less training than their enemies, yet still finding ways to win. He saw stories of small human groups holding their ground against much larger forces, not because they had better weapons, but because they refused to give up. Draxus Vel began to understand something important. Humans were not strong because of their ships or their weapons. Humans were strong because of something inside them, something that pushed them to keep fighting long after other species would have surrendered. It was not just their bodies that made them dangerous, it was their minds. But understanding this did not stop him from wanting revenge. He gathered a new fleet, larger and stronger than before, made up of Korath ships and mercenaries from 3 other raider groups who wanted a share of human resources. This time, he would not underestimate his enemy. This time, he would not send a small raiding party. He would bring 25 warships, enough firepower to destroy an entire planet's defenses if needed. His new target was not a small colony moon. His new target was Haven's Point, the largest human settlement outside of Earth itself, home to nearly 2 million people. A true test of what humanity could truly do when pushed to its absolute limit. Meanwhile, in the council chamber, Ambassador Kel Rethus had spent the past 3 months reviewing every piece of human history he could find. He was not like Draxus Vel. He did not seek revenge. He sought understanding. As the head of the investigation into the New Meridian battle, he had access to human archives that most species never bothered to look at. What he found disturbed him deeply. Humanity's homeworld, Earth, had a long and violent history. Humans had fought countless wars against each other for thousands of years, long before they ever built a single starship. They fought over land, over food, over beliefs, over pride. And through all of that fighting, they had developed something no other species in the Council had ever needed to develop so deeply. A culture built on resilience, a refusal to accept defeat, even when defeat seemed certain. Most species in the Council had grown peacefully, guided by wise elders or united under single leaders early in their history. Their militaries were built for order, precision, and calculated strategy. Humans, on the other hand, had grown through chaos. Their militaries were built not just on strategy, but on desperation, creativity, and the raw will to survive. Kel Rethus called a private meeting with General Elena Voss, the human military leader, who had been quietly preparing her forces since the Battle of New Meridian. They met aboard a neutral council station, in a small room with a single window looking out at the stars. "I have read your history," Rethus said simply, sitting across from her. "I understand now why New Meridian happened the way it did, but I do not understand why your species hid this strength for so long. 20 years in this council, and you allowed us to believe you were weak." Voss folded her hands on the table. "We didn't hide anything, Ambassador. We simply never had a reason to show it. Humanity has learned, through painful experience, that showing strength too early often invites more conflict, not less. We wanted peace. We still want peace, but peace does not mean weakness." "The Korath will not stop after New Meridian," Rethus said. "They will come back stronger. My scouts report gathering fleets near your border, likely preparing for a larger attack." Voss's face grew serious. "We know. We've been tracking them too." "Then you understand the danger," Rethus said. 25 ships, possibly more. Your colony at Haven's Point has almost 2 million people and very limited military defense. If they strike there, the loss of life could be staggering. Voss looked out the window at the stars for a long moment before speaking. "Ambassador, may I ask you something honestly?" "Of course. Why does the Council care? For 20 years, you placed us at the bottom of your rankings. You called us harmless. Why does one battle change that?" Rethus thought carefully before answering. "Because for 3,000 years, my people believed strength could be measured. Fleet size, weapon power, territory controlled. We built our entire understanding of the galaxy around these measurements. But New Meridian showed me something my measurements could never capture. A colony with almost nothing defeated a force that should have destroyed them easily. That is not something my instruments can explain, and things I cannot explain frighten me." Voss allowed herself a small, tired smile. "Welcome to the club, Ambassador. Humans have been frightening ourselves with our own history for centuries. Back on Earth, Preparations at Havens Point moved quickly. General Voss transferred as many ships and defense systems as she could, without stripping other colonies bare. But the truth was simple and hard. Humanity's military, while growing quickly, was still young compared to the ancient empires of the galaxy. Even with reinforcements, Havens Point would be outnumbered and outgunned if Draxus Vel attacked with his full fleet. Colonel Marcus Reyes, the hero of New Meridian, was called to help lead the defense at Havens Point. He arrived to find a colony far larger and more complex than the one he had defended months earlier. 2 million people, massive farming domes, schools, hospitals, and homes built across a stretch of land larger than most Earth cities. If this colony fell, the loss would be unimaginable. "We can't win a straight fight," Reyes told the local defense council on his first day. 25 warships against what we have here. It's not close. We need to think differently, the same way we did at New Meridian. "With mining ships?" asked one local commander doubtfully. "We don't have mining operations here, Colonel. This is a farming colony." Reyes nodded slowly, already thinking. "Then we use what we do have. Every advantage, no matter how small, matters when the numbers are against you." Over the following weeks, Reyes and his team studied every inch of Havens Point. The colony sat near a dense asteroid belt, much larger than the one at New Meridian, filled with twisting paths and hidden pockets of rock. It also had a network of automated farming drones, thousands of them, originally built to plant and harvest crops across the colony's vast fields. An idea began to form. "Those farming drones," Reyes said during a planning meeting, pointing at a hologram of the colony's equipment inventory. "They're small, fast, and built to fly in tight formations to avoid crashing into each other during harvest season. If we strip their harvesting tools and replace them with simple explosive charges, we could turn 2,000 drones into a swarm of small missiles." "That's actually clever," said Lieutenant Sarah Chen, who had transferred from New Meridian to help with the defense planning. "The Korath ships are built to fight against warships, not against a swarm of small, fast targets. Their point defense systems might not be able to track that many objects at once." "Exactly," Reyes said. "We won't win by matching their strength. We'll win by making our weakness their weakness too. If they can't tell the difference between a real threat and 2,000 fake ones, they'll waste time and resources trying to figure it out." The plan was risky. It relied on speed, coordination, and the hope that the enemy would be confused long enough for the human defenders to strike where it truly mattered. But it was the best chance they had. While the humans prepared, Draxus Vel's fleet grew closer. He had learned from his failure at New Meridian. This time, his scouts reported no unusual activity, no obvious signs of preparation. The humans, it seemed, were hiding their defenses well. Draxus Vel felt confident. Whatever surprise the humans had planned, he told himself, his 25 warships would be more than enough to crush it. He did not know about the 2,000 farming drones waiting quietly in hidden storage bays across Havens Point. He did not know about the human refusal to accept defeat, a trait built into their very bones over thousands of years of history. And he did not know that the Galactic Council itself was now watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Aboard the council station, Kel Rethis received hourly updates on the gathering Korath fleet. He had convinced the council to allow a small group of observation drones near Havens Point, officially to monitor for potential council law violations. But truthfully, because Rethis needed to see with his own eyes what would happen. He needed to know if New Meridian was a lucky victory, or if it was proof of something far greater. "The Korath fleet has entered the outer system," Unit 7 reported to the council chamber. "Estimated time until they reach Havens Point defensive perimeter, 6 hours. Kel Rethis leaned back in his seat, his black stone eyes fixed on the hologram before him. 6 hours until the galaxy would learn, once again, whether humanity's strength at New Meridian was truly something new under the stars, or simply a spark that would be crushed under the weight of overwhelming force. He hoped, quietly and without fully understanding why, that it was the former. Because if humans truly were capable of what he suspected, then the galaxy itself was about to change forever. And Kel Rethis, after 3,000 years of watching the same old patterns of power repeat themselves across the stars, found himself strangely eager to witness something new. The countdown had begun. 6 hours until the fleets would meet above Haven's Point. 6 hours until the galaxy would learn whether humanity's true strength was real, or whether New Meridian had simply been a single flicker of light in an otherwise dark and predictable universe. Colonel Reyes stood on the observation deck of Haven's Point's main tower, watching the stars where the enemy fleet would soon appear. Beside him, General Voss studied the same sky with quiet determination. "Are we ready?" Voss asked softly. Reyes did not answer immediately. He thought of New Meridian, of the friends he had lost, of the strange mix of fear and pride he had felt watching ordinary people become defenders of their home. He thought of the 2 million lives now depending on a plan built from farming drones and desperate hope. "We're as ready as we'll ever be," he finally said. "Now we just have to prove it." Above them, unseen but growing closer with every passing minute, 25 Korath warships moved steadily through the dark, carrying a commander determined to erase the shame of his last defeat. And far beyond the edge of human space, in a black metal ring floating between two dying stars, the Galactic Council waited, watching, ready to witness whatever would happen next. The battle for Haven's Point was about to begin. The Council reviewed the battle data. The galaxy never saw humanity's true strength, until now. The Korath fleet arrived above Haven's Point exactly when the scanners predicted. 25 warships dropped out of hyperspace in a tight formation, their dark hulls cutting sharp shapes against the stars. Draxus Vel stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the human colony below through the main viewport. Unlike New Meridian, this world was not quiet or unprepared, at least not on the surface. Defense platforms ringed the colony, and a small fleet of human warships hovered near the upper atmosphere, waiting. "They knew we were coming," said his second-in-command, a scarred Korath officer named Tessic. "Of course they did," Draxus Vel replied calmly. "It does not matter. Knowing we are coming and being able to stop us are two very different things. 25 warships. They have, what, a dozen? Maybe fewer. Begin the assault. Target their defense platforms first, then their fleet." The Korath ships moved forward, weapons charging, engines glowing bright against the darkness of space. On the ground and in orbit, the humans of Haven's Point watched the enemy fleet approach with steady, careful eyes. Aboard the human command ship, Colonel Marcus Reyes gripped the edge of his console, watching the same approach on his own screens. Beside him, General Elena Voss stood with her arms crossed, her face calm despite the storm about to arrive. "All units, hold formation," Reyes said into the comm system. "Let them come to us. Do not fire until they are within range of the asteroid field." The plan relied on patience, something that did not come easily when 25 enemy warships were closing in fast. But Reyes had learned an important lesson at New Meridian. The Korath fought with confidence built on easy victories against weaker worlds. That confidence was their weakness. If the humans could make them commit fully to an attack, believing victory was already certain, they would be less careful, less ready for anything unexpected. The Korath fleet crossed into weapons range and opened fire on the human defense platforms first. Explosions bloomed silently in the vacuum of space, as several platforms took heavy damage. Alarms rang across Haven's Point as debris rained down toward the upper atmosphere, burning bright streaks across the sky. "Platforms 3 and 7 are down," reported Lieutenant Sarah Chen from her station. "We're losing outer defenses fast." "Steady," Reyes said, his eyes locked on the approaching enemy ships. "Let them keep coming." The Korath fleet pushed deeper, growing more confident with every destroyed platform. Draxus Vel watched the battle unfold with satisfaction. This was going exactly as he expected. The humans were falling back, their defenses crumbling under his superior firepower. "Where is their fleet?" Tessic asked, noticing the small group of human warships had not yet engaged. "Are they retreating?" "Let them hide," Draxus Vel said. "It will not save them." But the human fleet was not hiding. It was waiting for the perfect moment. "Now," Reyes said quietly, "release the swarm." Deep within Haven's Point storage bays, hidden from Korath sensors by a combination of jamming signals and simple distance, 2,000 farming drones activated at once. Their harvesting arms had been stripped away and replaced with small explosive charges, each one capable of doing real damage if it struck the right target. The drones surged upward in a massive, chaotic cloud, moving fast and unpredictably, exactly as they had been designed to during harvest season, to avoid collisions with each other. On Korath's sensor screens, the sudden appearance of 2,000 small, fast-moving objects caused instant confusion. Alarms blared across every ship in Draxus Vel's fleet. "What is that?" Tessic shouted, staring at the chaotic swarm now filling their screens. "Report. What are we looking at?" "Unknown," came the frantic response from the sensor officer. "Too many objects. Too fast. They are not behaving like any weapon system in our database." Draxus Vel's confidence cracked for the first time since arriving at Haven's Point. "Point defense. Target the largest cluster. Fire at will." The Korath point defense systems, built to shoot down missiles and small fighter craft, struggled against the sheer number of drones flooding their scanners. Some were destroyed easily, exploding into harmless sparks. But hundreds more slipped through, their small size and erratic movement making them difficult targets. They struck against Korath hulls in waves, their explosive charges tearing into engine ports, sensor arrays, and weak points in the armor that a full missile strike would never have reached. It was not a knockout blow. The drones were too small and too weak individually to destroy a warship outright. But they did something just as valuable. They blinded the enemy, damaged their systems, and forced their attention away from the true threat, still waiting patiently in the shadow of the asteroid field. "Now," Reyes said, watching the chaos unfold on his screens. "All ships, engage. Target their damaged vessels first." The human fleet surged out from behind the asteroid field, weapons blazing. Unlike the drone swarm, these were real warships. Human vessels built and reinforced over the past 3 months with lessons learned from New Meridian. They struck fast and precise, aiming directly at the ships already weakened by the drone assault. Draxus Vel realized too late that he had fallen into exactly the kind of trap the humans had used before, only far more effective this time. "All ships, regroup. Focus fire on the human warships. Ignore the drones." But regrouping in the middle of chaos was not easy. Communication between Korath's ships grew tangled as commanders shouted conflicting orders, still trying to understand what had just happened to their sensors. Ships that should have been working together instead moved independently, some retreating, some pressing forward, creating gaps in their formation that the human fleet exploited without mercy. Aboard the flagship, Draxus Vel watched 3 more of his warships lose power, drifting helplessly just as they had at New Meridian months earlier. His mind raced, trying to understand how a colony of farmers had managed to outthink his fleet twice in a row. "This is not possible," he muttered. "We outnumber them 2 to 1. We have superior weapons, superior ships." "Sir," Tessic interrupted urgently, "human reinforcements are arriving from the outer colonies. Additional fleet signatures detected." Far from Haven's Point being alone in this fight, General Voss had quietly arranged for reserve fleets from 3 nearby human settlements to be on standby, ready to jump in the moment the battle truly began. It was another lesson learned from New Meridian. Never fight completely alone if reinforcements could be arranged in time. As human reserve ships arrived, the battle above Haven's Point shifted decisively. What had begun as a confident Korath assault against a weaker, unprepared colony had turned into a desperate fight for survival against an enemy who refused to follow the rules of war the raiders had grown used to exploiting. In the Galactic Council chamber, Kel Rethus watched the live feed from the Council observation drones with growing intensity. The other ambassadors had gathered around him, no longer bored or dismissive, but fully focused on the unfolding battle. "This is remarkable," said Ambassador Foss Undranar, his 4 arms folded tightly as he watched. They turned farming equipment into a weapon capable of disrupting an entire fleet's sensor systems. No military academy in the Council teaches tactics like this. Because no military academy in the Council has needed to survive the way humans have, Rethus said quietly, more to himself than to the others. "They do not fight like us. They fight like something is always at stake, even when it is not." On the battlefield, the tide had turned fully. Of the 25 Korath warships that had arrived above Haven's Point, 12 were destroyed outright, 7 were disabled and drifting, and only 6 remained combat capable. Draxus Vel, watching his fleet crumble around him, made the only decision left to a commander who valued his own survival. "Retreat," he said, his voice heavy with defeat. "All remaining ships, retreat immediately." The surviving Korath ships turned and fled into hyperspace, leaving behind the wreckage of their once mighty fleet. On the ground and in orbit around Haven's Point, humans cheered as the enemy withdrew, though the celebration was tempered by the losses they had suffered. 3 human warships had been destroyed in the battle, and dozens of the reserve fleet had taken heavy damage. Casualties among the defense forces numbered in the hundreds. It was not a victory without cost. Colonel Reyes stood on the observation deck once again, watching the smoke clear from the battle above. Beside him, General Voss let out a long breath she seemed to have been holding for hours. "We held," she said softly. "We held," Reyes agreed. "But it cost us. It always costs us." Down on the surface, families reunited with soldiers who had survived, while others gathered quietly to mourn those who had not returned. It was a familiar scene throughout human history, one repeated countless times across countless wars on Earth, now playing out once again on a distant colony world under an alien sky. In the council chamber, the mood was equally serious. The battle data streamed in steadily, showing not just the tactical brilliance of the human defense, but the human cost as well. Kel Rethis studied the casualty reports carefully, noting something important. Despite the victory, humans had not celebrated recklessly. They mourned their losses even as they held their ground. It was a strange balance of strength and grief that Rethis found himself struggling to fully understand. "Ambassador," said Unit 7, "there is a new development. Korath Cartel High Command has issued a bounty on Draxus Vel for his repeated failures against human forces. It appears his standing within the cartel has collapsed entirely." "Good," Rethis said simply. "Perhaps this will discourage further raids on human territory, for now." But even as he said this, Rethis knew the truth. The Korath cartel was only one small threat among many in the galaxy. If word spread that humanity had defeated not one, but 2 determined attacks using clever tactics and fierce determination, other, far more dangerous powers might take notice. Some would be cautious. Others might see humanity not as a threat to avoid, but as a challenge to be tested. The battle for Haven's Point had ended, but Kel Rethis understood, with a growing certainty he could not shake, that the story of humanity's true strength was only just beginning to unfold. The galaxy had seen 2 battles now, 2 proofs that humans were not the weak, harmless species everyone had assumed them to be. The question that remained, hanging heavy over every ambassador in the council chamber, was simple and unsettling. If humanity could do this with farming drones and mining lasers, defending small colonies at the edge of known space, what would they be capable of if truly threatened on a larger scale? Nobody in the chamber had an answer, but all of them, even the proudest and most ancient among them, felt a small, cold shiver of uncertainty settle over the room. The galaxy had underestimated humanity for 20 years. That mistake, it seemed, was about to become very costly for anyone who dared to test them again. Far below, on the ruined edges of Haven's Point, Colonel Reyes knelt beside a small memorial being built for the fallen. He placed a single stone on the growing pile, a human tradition older than written history itself, honoring those who gave everything so others could live. As he stood, he looked up at the stars, now quiet after the storm of battle, and wondered how many more times humanity would be tested before the galaxy finally understood the truth. He did not know it yet, but the greatest test of all was still to come. The Council reviewed the battle data. The galaxy never saw humanity's true strength. Until now, 6 months after the Battle of Haven's Point, the galaxy looked at humanity with new eyes. Word of the 2 victories had spread far beyond Council space, carried by traders, spies, and curious travelers who wanted to see the small blue planet everyone was suddenly talking about. Some species sent diplomats to study human culture more closely. Others sent scouts to quietly measure human military strength, unsure whether to treat this rising species as a friend or a threat. And one power, far older and far more dangerous than the Korath cartel, decided it was time to test humanity for real. The Vashtar Dominion was not a group of raiders or pirates. It was an ancient empire, older than the Council itself, ruling over 300 star systems through strict order and overwhelming military might. The Vashtar did not raid for resources or slaves. They conquered for one reason only: expansion. Any species too weak to resist them was simply absorbed into their empire. Their worlds reshaped to serve Vashtar interests. Their people turned into obedient citizens of an empire that valued order above all else. For centuries, the Vashtar had avoided direct conflict with the Galactic Council, choosing instead to expand quietly along the galaxy's edges, swallowing smaller, unprotected civilizations one by one. Humanity, sitting near the very edge of Council space, had always been a tempting target, but the Vashtar were patient. They preferred to study a species fully before committing to conquest. After watching the battles of New Meridian and Haven's Point, Vashtar High Command grew curious. Not afraid, not yet, but curious enough to send a proper invasion force, not the small numbers used to test weaker worlds, but a fleet built to conquer an entire planet in a single overwhelming strike. 50 warships, far larger and far more advanced than anything the Korath cartel had ever fielded, backed by ground forces trained for total occupation. This was not a raid. This was the opening move of a full invasion, aimed directly at Earth itself. Kelrethis learned of the Vashtar fleet's movement through Council intelligence networks 3 weeks before it reached human space. He called an emergency session of the Council, gathering every ambassador who could attend on short notice. The Vashtar Dominion is moving a 50-ship invasion fleet toward Earth, he announced, his voice carrying a weight it had never held before. This is not a raid, this is conquest. If Earth falls, humanity's colonies will follow soon after, one by one, until nothing remains of what they have built. The chamber erupted into anxious murmurs. Ambassador Foss Undranar leaned forward, his forearms tense. The Vashtar have never lost a full invasion in recorded history. 300 systems, Rethis. 300. No species has ever stopped them once they commit to conquest. I am aware, Rethis said grimly, which is exactly why I called this session. If humanity falls to the Vashtar, their homeworld and its resources will fuel further expansion into Council space. This is no longer simply humanity's problem, it is everyone's problem. The Council debated fiercely over what action to take. Some argued for full military support, sending Council fleets to reinforce Earth's defenses. Others argued for caution, unwilling to provoke the Vashtar Dominion directly, fearing it might expand the conflict into a war none of them were prepared to fight. In the end, the Council reached a compromise. They would not send combat fleets, fearing direct confrontation with the Vashtar, but they would allow humanity full access to Council intelligence, technology data, and strategic advice, along with permission to purchase emergency military supplies at reduced cost. It was not the full support humanity needed, but it was something. On Earth, General Elena Voss received the news of the coming invasion with grim determination. She gathered her top commanders, including Colonel Marcus Reyes, now promoted and placed in charge of Earth's central defense strategy, following his success at Haven's Point. 50 warships, Reyes said, studying the intelligence reports spread across the command table. That's more than double what we faced at Haven's Point. And this time they're not raiders looking for an easy win. They're an invasion force, built to conquer, not to raid and run. We have 3 weeks, Voss said. 3 weeks to prepare Earth's defenses against the largest threat humanity has ever faced. Then we use every trick we've learned, Reyes said, and we build a few new ones. What followed was the largest military mobilization in human history. Every shipyard on Earth and its colonies worked around the clock, building new warships, repairing old ones, and modifying civilian vessels for combat, just as they had done at New Meridian and Haven's Point, but now on a scale never before attempted. Farming drones across a dozen colonies were converted into makeshift weapons, mining lasers were stripped from asteroid belts, and mounted onto hastily built defense platforms. Every able-bodied volunteer who wanted to help was given a role, whether in combat, supply lines, or emergency medical support. But ships and weapons alone would not be enough against a fleet the size the Vashtar were bringing. Reyes knew this, so did Voss. They needed something more. They needed a plan built not on matching the enemy's strength, but on exploiting the very thing that made the Vashtar so dangerous in the first place: their pride. The Vashtar have never lost an invasion, Reyes explained during a strategy meeting 3 days before the fleet's expected arrival. That means they've never truly needed to adapt. Their tactics are built on overwhelming force, not on flexibility. If we can force them into a situation their standard tactics can't handle, we create an opening. What kind of situation? Voss asked. Reyes pulled up a detailed map of Earth's solar system. Earth's asteroid belt is smaller than the one at Haven's Point, but we have something else. The Moon. If we draw their fleet into a fight near the Moon's gravity well, using the terrain to our advantage, we force them to fight in tighter, more chaotic conditions where their numbers matter less. And if they don't take the bait? Asked another commander. Then we make sure they have to, Reyes said. We position Earth's primary defense grid near the Moon itself. They'll have no choice but to engage there if they want a clear path to the planet. The plan was risky, relying heavily on the enemy behaving exactly as predicted. But with limited time and limited resources, it was the best option available. Over the following 3 weeks, human forces worked tirelessly to prepare, transforming the space around Earth's moon into a carefully hidden battlefield, filled with disguised weapon platforms, minefields built from repurposed mining charges, and fleets positioned to strike from unexpected angles the moment the Vashtar fleet arrived. When the Vashtar invasion fleet finally reached the edge of Earth's solar system, they moved with the calm, unstoppable confidence of an empire that had never known defeat. Their commander, a stern and calculating being named Grand Marshal Keswick Thorne, studied the human defenses from a distance, noting the fleet positioned near Earth's moon. They believe positioning near the moon will save them, Thorne said to his officers, unimpressed. Predictable. Move the fleet forward. Standard conquest formation. The Vashtar fleet advanced steadily, their 50 warships forming a massive wall of firepower that dwarfed anything humanity had ever faced before. As they closed in on the moon, the true scale of the coming battle became clear to every human watching from Earth's surface and orbiting stations. 50 warships, each larger and more heavily armed than the warships the Korath had brought to Haven's Point, moving with terrifying precision toward a defense force that, despite months of preparation, still felt small and fragile in comparison. All units, hold positions, Reyes said over the fleet-wide comm, his voice steady despite the enormous pressure of the moment. Let them commit to the formation. We only get one chance to spring this properly. The Vashtar fleet entered the space near the moon, exactly as predicted, their formation tightening as they prepared for what they believed would be a swift, decisive strike against Earth's primary defenses. Grand Marshal Thorne watched the human fleet with growing impatience, expecting them to break formation and retreat at any moment, just as countless other species had done when facing overwhelming Vashtar force. They did not retreat. Now, Reyes said quietly. The hidden weapon platforms around the moon activated at once, unleashing a coordinated strike from multiple angles that caught the Vashtar fleet completely by surprise. At the same time, human warships, positioned carefully within the moon's shadow, surged forward, striking at the enemy's flanks before the massive Vashtar formation could properly respond. Minefields built from repurposed mining charges detonated across key paths, forcing Vashtar ships into narrower channels where human forces could concentrate their attacks more effectively. Report, Thorne demanded, alarmed by the sudden chaos erupting across his sensor screens. What is happening? Multiple hidden weapon platforms, unknown positions, his sensor officer shouted. Minefields detected across primary approach routes. Human fleet engaging from unexpected angles. For the first time in centuries, Grand Marshal Keswick Thorne felt something unfamiliar. Uncertainty. His fleet, built on the assumption of overwhelming unstoppable force, found itself fighting not a single unified battle, but dozens of smaller, chaotic engagements spread across the moon's shadow, each one draining resources and attention away from the larger conquest goal. The battle raged for hours, far longer and far more costly than any Vashtar commander had experienced in generations. Human forces, fighting with the same desperate creativity and fierce determination that had defined New Meridian and Haven's Point, refused to yield ground even as losses mounted on both sides. In the Galactic Council chamber, every ambassador watched the unfolding battle in stunned silence. Never before had a species facing full Vashtar invasion managed to hold their ground for more than a few hours. Humanity was now entering its 6th hour of continuous brutal combat, and showed no signs of breaking. "This is unprecedented," Ambassador Foss, Undrenar whispered, watching the tactical displays with wide, disbelieving eyes. Kel Rethus said nothing. He simply watched, his black stone eyes fixed on the image of Colonel Marcus Reyes, coordinating Earth's defense from the command center, with the same calm determination he had shown at New Meridian nearly a year earlier. Rethus understood now, more clearly than ever before, that this was not luck. This was not a single fortunate battle. This was who humanity truly was. As the battle near Earth's moon reached its climax, both sides had suffered heavy losses. 20 of the 50 Vashtar warships had been destroyed or crippled, an unprecedented casualty rate for the Dominion's forces. Human losses were severe as well, with dozens of ships lost and thousands of casualties among the defense forces. But humanity had done something no other species facing Vashtar invasion had ever managed to do. They had held. Grand Marshal Thorne, watching his once unstoppable fleet suffer losses beyond anything in Vashtar military history, made a decision that would echo across the galaxy for years to come. "Order a full withdrawal," he said, his voice heavy with a defeat he had never expected to face. "We will return with greater numbers. This is not over." As the remaining Vashtar ships retreated into hyperspace, cheers erupted across Earth and its orbiting stations. Humanity had survived the largest military threat in its history, standing against an empire that had never before known true defeat. But as Colonel Reyes looked out over the wreckage of the battle, smoke still rising from dozens of destroyed ships on both sides, he understood that this victory, like the ones before it, had come at a terrible cost, and Grand Marshal Thorne's final words echoed in his mind with a chilling certainty. This was not over. In the council chamber, Kel Rethus finally spoke, breaking the long silence that had settled over the room since the battle's end. "The galaxy has just witnessed something it has never seen before, a species holding the line against the Vashtar Dominion, not once, but through 6 hours of continuous, brutal conflict. Humanity did not win this battle through superior technology or overwhelming numbers. They won it through something far more dangerous: determination that refuses to break, no matter the cost." He looked around the chamber at the other ambassadors, each of them processing the full weight of what they had just witnessed. "We were wrong about them," Rethus continued. 20 years, we called them harmless. 20 years, we placed them at the bottom of our rankings. Today, they proved to the entire galaxy that strength is not always measured in fleet size or weapon power. Sometimes, it is measured in the simple, unbreakable will to survive. The chamber fell silent once more, every ambassador understanding, perhaps for the first time, that the galaxy they thought they knew was about to change forever. Humanity had faced raiders, and won. Humanity had faced an empire that never lost, and held its ground. The question now was not whether humanity was strong. The question was how strong humanity would become, now that the entire galaxy finally understood the truth. The Council reviewed the battle data. The galaxy never saw humanity's true strength, until now. 1 year after the battle near Earth's moon, the Galactic Council chamber looked very different from the one that had once dismissed humanity as harmless. The black metal ring still floated between its 2 dying stars, but the mood inside had changed completely. Where once humanity's seat sat at the very bottom, largely ignored, it now held a place of careful respect, watched closely by every other species in the room. Grand Marshal Keswick Thorne had kept his promise. 3 months after his humiliating retreat near Earth, the Vashtar Dominion returned, this time with 80 warships and a fleet of ground forces meant to end humanity's resistance once and for all. But humanity had used those 3 months wisely, working alongside a small but growing number of Council allies who had finally begun to see the value in supporting this stubborn, resilient species. The second battle for Earth was even longer and more brutal than the first, stretching across nearly 2 full days of continuous fighting. Humanity did not win it alone. Ships from 3 sympathetic Council species arrived partway through the battle, having watched humanity's earlier stand with growing respect and deciding, at last, that a species willing to fight this hard for its survival deserved support rather than indifference. Together, the combined fleet forced the Vashtar Dominion into the first true, undeniable defeat in its long, unbroken history of conquest. Grand Marshal Thorne himself was captured during the final hours of the battle, brought before a joint council tribunal to answer for the unprovoked invasion. The Vashtar Dominion, its aura of invincibility shattered before the entire galaxy, was forced into a treaty that ended its centuries-long campaign of conquest along the Council's borders. Humanity, once a footnote in the history of the galaxy, had become the reason a 300-system empire finally faced consequences for its endless expansion. Kelrethus stood before the full council one final time to deliver his report on the events of the past year. The chamber was full, every ambassador present, eager to hear the conclusions of the investigation that had begun with a single small battle at a colony called New Meridian. "When I began this investigation," Rethus said, his voice carrying clearly across the silent chamber, "I sought to understand a single strange victory, a colony of miners and farmers defeating a professional raider fleet. I believed, at the time, that this was simply an unusual event, a lucky outcome that would not repeat itself." He paused, looking around at the gathered ambassadors. "I was wrong. What I found, through months of study and 3 separate battles, was not luck. It was the true nature of a species that the Council had misunderstood for 20 years. Humanity's strength does not come from superior technology, though they have proven remarkably resourceful with what they have. It does not come from overwhelming numbers, for they have always been outnumbered in every battle they have fought since joining this Council. Humanity's true strength comes from something far more difficult to measure, and far more dangerous to underestimate." Unit 7 activated a final hologram, showing images from all 3 battles side by side. New Meridian's mining ships turned into makeshift warships. Havens Point's farming drones transformed into a chaotic, sensor-blinding swarm. Earth's moon turned into a carefully hidden battlefield that had brought an ancient, unbeaten empire to its knees. "Humans do not fight because they believe they will win," Rethus continued. "They fight because giving up is simply not something they know how to do. Their entire history, long before they ever reached the stars, is built upon this single truth. They have faced overwhelming odds again and again throughout their history, and again, they have found ways to endure, adapt, and ultimately prevail. This is not a temporary strength born of desperation. It is woven into the very core of who they are as a species." Ambassador Foss Undranar rose slowly from his seat. "Then what do you propose, Rethus? How should this council treat a species capable of such things?" Rethus considered the question carefully before answering. "Not as a threat to be feared, nor as a tool to be used. I propose we treat humanity as what they have proven themselves to be, a species worthy of true partnership. Strong allies make the galaxy safer for everyone, not just for themselves." The Council voted that day, for the first time in 20 years, to fully reclassify humanity's status. No longer would they hold the lowest seat, barely acknowledged by the older, more established powers. Humanity was formally recognized as a rising power within the Council, granted a voice equal to species who had held their places for thousands of years. Back on Earth, General Elena Voss received the news of the Council's decision with quiet satisfaction. She had spent her entire career believing this day would come, though she had never imagined it would take 3 brutal battles and the near destruction of an ancient empire to prove humanity's worth to a galaxy that had never truly understood them. Colonel Marcus Reyes, now recognized across human space as one of the finest military minds of his generation, stood once again on an observation deck, this time overlooking Earth itself, rather than a distant colony moon. Beside him stood Lieutenant Sarah Chen, promoted several times since the days of New Meridian, now a respected officer in her own right. "It's strange," Chen said, looking down at the blue and green world below them. "A year ago, we were just trying to survive one battle. Now the entire galaxy knows our name." Reyes nodded slowly, the weight of everything they had been through visible in his tired but steady eyes. "Knowing our name isn't the same as understanding us, Lieutenant. That's the real work now, making sure the galaxy understands not just what we can do in battle, but who we are when the fighting stops." Chen considered this for a moment. "Do you think it will stop? The fighting, I mean, now that the Council recognizes us properly?" Reyes looked out at the stars, thinking of New Meridian, of Havens Point, of the long, brutal battles above Earth's moon. He thought of the friends he had lost, the families who had said goodbye to soldiers who never returned home, and the quiet, steady strength that had carried humanity through each impossible fight. "I don't know," he admitted honestly. "The galaxy is a big place, full of species we still don't fully understand, and plenty who don't understand us either. There will be other challenges, other tests, but I think, whatever comes next, we've shown the galaxy something important. We're not going anywhere, and we don't break easily." Far above them, in the black metal ring that housed the Galactic Council, Kel Rethis sat alone in the empty chamber after the day's session had ended. He looked once more at the final image from his investigation report, the same image that had haunted him since the very beginning. Colonel Reyes standing amid the wreckage of New Meridian, tired, sad, but unbroken. For 3,000 years, the Dravan Empire had measured strength through numbers, technology, and territory. Humanity had taught Rethis something his own long history had never fully revealed. True strength was not simply about winning every battle. It was about the willingness to keep standing, again and again, no matter how many times you were knocked down. He thought of his own people, proud and ancient, who had grown comfortable in their power over the centuries. He wondered, quietly, whether the Dravan Empire itself had grown too used to easy victories, too unfamiliar with the kind of struggle that had shaped humanity into what it had become. Perhaps, Rethis thought, there was still much the galaxy could learn from this small, stubborn species from the blue planet called Earth. Word of humanity's rise spread quickly across council space in the months that followed. Other species, some curious, some cautious, began reaching out to humanity for trade, alliance, and cultural exchange. Earth, once an obscure world at the edge of known space, slowly became one of the most talked-about civilizations in the galaxy, respected not for the size of its fleets, but for the strength of its spirit. The Korath cartel, weakened and humiliated after their failed raids, largely avoided human territory from that point forward, choosing easier targets who had not yet proven themselves so costly to attack. The Vashtar Dominion, bound by the treaty forced upon them after their defeat, turned their attention inward, focusing on rebuilding what remained of their shattered military pride rather than further conquest along the Council's borders. And humanity, having survived raiders, ancient empires, and the doubt of an entire galaxy, continued doing what it had always done best throughout its long, difficult history. It kept moving forward, one careful step at a time, building something new out of every hardship it faced. Colonel Marcus Reyes eventually retired from active military service, taking a quiet position teaching military strategy to a new generation of human officers, many of whom had grown up hearing stories of New Meridian, Haven's Point, and the historic battle above Earth's moon. He often reminded his students of a simple truth he had learned across 3 impossible battles. Strength isn't about being the biggest or the strongest in the room, he would tell them. It's about what you do when everything is stacked against you, when giving up would be so much easier than continuing to fight. Humanity has never been the strongest species in this galaxy, but we've always been one of the most stubborn, and sometimes that makes all the difference. In the Galactic Council chamber, humanity's seat, once ignored and dismissed, now carried a quiet weight of respect, earned through blood, sacrifice, and an unbreakable will to survive. The galaxy had reviewed the battle data, studied every detail of humanity's rise, and finally understood a truth that had been hidden in plain sight for 20 long years. Humanity's true strength had never been about weapons, ships, or numbers. It had always been about the simple, powerful refusal to ever stop fighting for what mattered most. And now, at last, the entire galaxy knew it.